Okay, good morning, everybody, and Hazak Baruch. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful Monday morning as we are back from Pesach vacation. Welcome back, everyone, and I hope you enjoyed yourselves. Here we go as we are back in action, and we have a beautiful parasha coming up, Parashat Aharei Mot. Okay, so our parasha begins with a tragic episode of reminding us of the death of Aaron's two sons, Nadav and Avihu. So here we go. Let's just read the first couple of verses of our parasha. Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe. God speaks to Moshe. Aharei Mot Shnei bnei Aharon. After the death of Aaron's two sons, Bekorbatam lifnei Adonai vayamutu, who died as they tried to draw near the presence of Hashem. Okay, so we read about Aaron's son's death a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, right? A few weeks ago in Parashat Shemini. If you remember, we spoke a little bit about their death and why they died, many different opinions of what they did wrong. But then we took a couple of weeks break with Tazria and Metzorah. But now we're going back to what God told Moshe to tell Aharon right after the episode of the deaths of Aharon's two sons. He says to him right after they die, and again, there's a lot going on over here, how to understand these couple of verses at the beginning. But just to keep it a little bit simple for today's class. And he says to Moshe, Daber el Aharon, I want you to tell your brother, Al yavo bechol et el HaKodesh, he is not to enter or at will the inner sanctuary, the Kodesh HaKodashim. We know one of the sins of Nadav and Avihu, why they died, is because they entered the Kodesh HaKodashim, the Holy of Holies. And so God says to Moshe, make sure you tell Aharon, like his sons, he cannot enter whenever he wants. Rather, he has to bring, if he wants to enter, he has to bring par ben bakar, and he has to wear 4 clothing of white, and he has to bring 2 goats. And it goes on. And of course, when do we do this whole ceremony of the 2 goats and the lottery and all of the stuff that's mentioned in the beginning of our parasha? When is this done? This is done on, very good, Yom Kippur. Now, on a simple level, the Torah is telling us that Aharon was only allowed to enter on Yom Kippur when he does all of these things with the coals and the shovel and ashes. We read about it on Yom Kippur actually. And he used to do this every Yom Kippur. And our parasha is actually the source of what avodah, what service is done every Yom Kippur. It's taken from our parasha, Parashat Aharei Mot. Okay, some now do explain, by the way, it's important to know, that Aharon was actually allowed to enter any day of the year he wanted, so long that he does this service. Okay, Aharon wasn't limited to 1 day a year. His sons and future Kohanim could only go in Yom Kippur. But Aharon was able to enter any day of the year. But I would like to just touch today on the first pasuk. God says to Moshe, right after Aharon's sons die, Nadav and Avihu, and there is a very fascinating midrash, okay? Midrashim are always, when you hear a midrash, they're always like a puzzle, and you have to decipher and decode what is the midrash saying. Aharon does not die, no. Okay? Aharon does not die in our parasha. He's alive all the way till Parashat Hukat. Okay? We have in the summer, we're going to read about that. Okay? He doesn't die over here. We still got a lot of ways to go. Okay? Fine. So take a look at this fascinating midrash. And midrashim often in the beginning are hard to understand what they mean, but you know that there is amazing wealth waiting for us. The midrash says that when Eov heard of this death of Nadav and Avihu, which was very tragic, you're talking about 2 great rabbis in their own right. They were giants, they were tzaddikim, they were Aharon's sons. It's tragic on many levels, okay? And when Eov heard about their death, Eov, according to our tradition, again, we don't know, there's a lot of ambiguity around Eov. Okay, it's not clear who he was. It's not clear if he was. Okay, it's some say it's all a mashal. The whole book of Eov that's written. It's one of the 24 books of our literature of Tanakh. but some say it was written by Moshe. Iyov was just a fictional character. It never happened. So Iyov is not a simple topic, but Iyov, according to the opinions that whatever you understand, whether he did exist, he didn't exist, fiction, non-fiction, but at the end of the day, Iyov was somebody that the way the story is written about him, whether or not he really was in existence, it was a person that suffered tremendously in his lifetime. The book of Iyov, which was written, and some attribute the book to Moses. Moshe wrote the book of Iyov. Iyov was somebody who suffered a lot. Iyov was a good guy. The Torah writes about Iyov. If we just open up quickly to the beginning, the pasuk is very, it compliments Iyov. Take a look at the opening words. Ish haya be'eretz Utz. There was a man in the land of Utz. Iyov shemo, his name was Iyov. Ve'haya ish ahu tam ve'yashar ve'yere Elohim ve'sar mera. He was very tam and yashar and straight, God-fearing. Sar mera. What does it mean, sar mera? He would stay away from evil. So Iyov was a very straight guy. Very complimenting over here to have the Torah write about you, that you're straight and that you're God-fearing, and he didn't do evil. And he had 7 boys and 3 girls. He had a lot of money. He had an amazing wife. Iyov was living life. Everything was going perfect for him until one day, Vahi Hayom, it was the day of judgment. It was Rosh Hashanah, some say, whatever it was. And Satan comes, and Satan says to God, this guy Iyov, he's not that good after all. You never really tested him. Of course he's straight. Give him a test, let's see. Give him a hiccup. Let's see how he performs. And God says, no problem. Test him however you want. Just don't take away his life. And of course we know Iyov is tested tremendously with his health, with his children's deaths, lo alenu. And a very, very sad, very scary book. It's a book, one's allowed to read it on days that one's usually forbidden to learn Torah. That's how sad the book is, because you read about such tragic things in the book, and it's very philosophical. He has very big, deep conversations with his friends. How could God do this to me? It's unjust, etc., etc. Now the Midrash tells us that Iyov, I just want to read to you the Midrash. The Midrash says, there's a pasuk at the end of the book, chapter 37, pasuk 1, where he says, Af lezot yeherad lebi veyitar mimmekomo. Also for this my heart trembles and is moved out of its place. Okay? So again, this is a verse in Iyov. Af lezot yeherad lebi veyitar mimmekomo. And it's not clear what exactly is Iyov referring to. What caused your heart to tremble? Why are you trembling, Iyov? It's the beginning of a chapter. Af lezot, and also for this my heart trembles. What did Iyov exactly see that caused him to tremble? And the Midrash comes to answer this question. Says the Midrash, Rabbi, you know what Iyov heard that caused him to tremble? He heard about the deaths of Nadav and Avihu. When Iyov heard this, he trembled. Now it is interesting because Iyov did live. Again, we're gonna go. I'm not gonna keep saying every time according to the ones that he exists. I'm just gonna assume we're gonna go today with the opinions that it was factual. Iyov lived during the time of Moshe Rabbeinu. Okay. Matter of fact, when Moshe sends spies to the land of Israel, and he tells them, I want you to go see if there's, from where to attack. He gives them different instructions. One of the instructions he wants the spies to go and search, are there any trees in the land of Israel, of Canaan? And the commentaries are trying to figure out what exactly does Moshe mean by that? What does he care all of a sudden about the landscaping? Is he interested to go see the sights? Does he want to know? Do they? Is he tree hunting? What's Moshe? Do they have any tree? Who cares about the trees? And they explain, Rashi says, a tree is a metaphor for protection, and he's referring to a tzaddik. He's telling the spies, I want you to go see. Do they have any tzaddikim that will bring shade and protect them from us. Maybe there's a tzaddik that can defend against us. The Iron Dome, the first Iron Dome. And who was he referring to specifically? He was referring to Eov. So Eov is around in this time, and he is a tzaddik. He's a good guy, right? And he hears about the deaths of Nadav and Avihu, and the pasuk says in Eov that when he heard about this, Af lezot yeherad labi, and for this also I start trembling. Okay, this is the Midrash. So the Midrash answers one question, but it opens up another. The Midrash says, why was Eov afraid? It tells us why. He was afraid because he heard of the deaths of Nadav and Avihu. But he leaves that now with another question. Why would that cause him to tremble? Why would that be a source of fear for him? For more than anyone else? It sounds like something specifically about Eov. When Eov heard, he was afraid. It sounds like other people weren't afraid. Something specific. And today we have to try to see what is the connection between Nadav and Avihu's deaths that caused Eov to now tremble, that made him afraid. I would like to share with you something that Rabbi Bogomilsky brings down over here in his book Ve'ha'arev Na, something very powerful. That really, to understand and appreciate this, we have to go back to Eov even earlier. Where is the first time we are introduced to Eov in our early literature, in the words of our rabbis? Before, again, even before Moshe Rabbeinu, we find Eov hinted to, brought down in the Midrashim. The rabbis tell us, Masechet Sotah and other places, that when Paro, let's go back to the Jewish people, right when they came down to Mizrahi, they were multiplying. We just read it in the Haggadah, 6 at a time. Paru, Vayishretzu, Vayirbu. There are a lot of Jews, and Paro starts getting paranoid that maybe the Jews, there's so many already, there's more Jews than non-Jews. There's more Jews than Egyptians. And he starts fearing maybe the Jews are going to overcome and overpower and then kick us out, drive us out of Egypt. They're going to become the host. And he was afraid of this, so he decided to try to curb and limit the Jewish people's population he wasn't sure exactly what to do. So the Gemara tells us that he calls a meeting and he consults 3 advisors, okay? 3 very famous people. The first one was Bilam. Okay, Bilam, a known anti-Semite. The second one was Yitro. Yitro, we know who's that, right? Moshe Rabbeinu's father-in-law. And Eov. Of course, this is before he was his father-in-law, right? And finally, Eov. Oh, Eov, we know that name. We just spoke about Eov a little bit. So this is Eov when he was young. You have Bilam, you have Yitro, and you have Eov. And he asks them, how do you think we should proceed with the Jewish children, with the people? And Bilam says, of course, the anti-Semite that he was, we must drown the Jewish children to again stop the population. So he advised to kill the boys. Okay. Yitro was not a fan of this piece of advice. Yitro argued strongly this is inhumane, we don't kill people, they're not a threat, they didn't do anything, it's all in your head, you're paranoid. Yitro doesn't like this advice, and therefore he is forced to flee. Yeah, Bilam goes back home in his riches and he's paraded. Yitro doesn't like the advice and he's forced to run away. And Eov, anyone know Eov's reaction? What was Eov's response? The rabbis tell us Eov remained silent. Okay, Eov didn't say anything. He didn't give any advice. Okay, and the rabbis tell us that eventually each one got paid back what they deserved. The first, Bilam eventually was killed, right? Of course, that's deserving. You kill them, you get killed. Yitro, he was pro-Jews. He was a philo-Semite, right? He loved Jews, and he was pro-humanity, and he was pro-life, and he was encouraging good things. So he gets rewarded with a son-in-law that is Moshe Rabbeinu. Again, it's fair. Bilam's bad, he gets killed. Yitro is good, he gets Moshe Rabbeinu. What was Eov's reward or punishment? I don't know. What would you give Iyov? What's the midah keneged midah? What's the measure for measure that you're going to give a guy like Iyov? Iyov is quiet, so what are you going to give him back? So the Gemara says, well, Iyov gets what he deserves. And what does he deserve? The whole book of Iyov. All of these yisurim, all of these punishments that come to him, that's what he deserves. This is really hard to understand. I think we all agree Bil'am deserves what was coming to him. Yitro deserves what was coming to him. But does Iyov deserve to get such horrible affliction and torture? You're talking about his children dying. You're talking about sickness, losing his wealth, losing his health, losing his family, everything. He just goes from top to bottom. He hits literally rock bottom. And the Gemara says, yes, of course, it's what he deserves. What? Why does he deserve that? Maybe he wasn't as good as Yitro, so don't reward him with Moshe Rabbeinu as a son-in-law. Okay, you don't want to give him Moshe as a son-in-law. Give him Korach as a son-in-law. I don't know. Give him someone regular. You gonna kill his kids? Is that a fair measure for measure? After all, he didn't say kill them. So why does Iyov? This is a question that's asked by Rav Chaim Shmulevitz and others. It seems a little bit that the Torah is unfair in how we're treating Iyov's response. And they bring down over here that Nahal Kedumim says that really the answer to this question goes back to our parasha, Nadav and Avihu, and their deaths. We wonder, why did they die? Why did they get killed? What did they do wrong? And again, it's not a simple question. There's many opinions of what they did wrong, why they were getting killed over here. The pasuk again opens with these words. Vaydaber Adonai Moshe Aharei Mot shnei bnei Aharon, after the deaths of two sons of Aharon, Nadav and Avihu. The Gemara Masechet Sanhedrin, though, says one of the reasons of why they were, and again, some says they came in drunk, they were maybe a little bit disrespectful. So the Gemara says that the Gemara says, once they were walking, Nadav and Avihu, the two sons of Aharon, were walking behind Moshe and Aharon. They were walking, I don't know where they were going, maybe to the zoo or to Six Flags or whatever they were going to. And they overheard, they're watching the two rabbis walking in front, Moshe and Aharon, they're walking. And Nadav and Avihu, they're already the up-and-coming rabbis. They're the next generation. And they started saying to each other, Nadav, look at the language of the Gemara. Nadav said to Avihu, when will these two old people die so that you and I can take over the leadership? You heard? Say it again. When will these two people die so that we can take over the leadership? And it's something that maybe one, if you put it in context, could understand. It's already a new generation. You see it a lot of times. The shul, the rabbi's getting older, and he's lost touch. And you have the new rabbi, and he comes in, and he says, what is, yalla, it's time for you to retire, go down to Miami, it's time to, give, it's a new generation, you gotta attract the young blood, you gotta bring in the new people, you're not talking to them, you don't understand the times anymore, right? That's what Nadav and Avihu said to each other. Nadav says it to Avihu. And the Torah says, the Gemara says in Sanhedrin, that it's for this comment of Nadav that cost them their life. And one may ask, well, I understand why you punish Nadav, but why is Avihu punished? What did Avihu do wrong? Nadav said something to Avihu. Nadav should get killed. It's chutzpah, it's lacking respect for authority, that's not okay. I understand, okay. But what did the brother, he's walking. He was spoken to. What did he do wrong? The answer must be, and this is such a powerful lesson, we must conclude that tolerating evil is equal to doing evil. Even though Avihu didn't say anything. Nadav said it. But Avihu, you didn't protest. You didn't argue. You didn't object. In life, you see something, you must say something. And sometimes there could be what we call a tacit approval. Sometimes when we don't say anything, we are tolerating evil. That itself is very, very evil. Okay? We know in Nazi Germany, the Jewish people outnumbered the soldiers. But when you have all of the people of Germany that can just sit by and watch and do nothing and say nothing, and then to plead, oh, it wasn't us. We didn't do anything. We weren't the soldiers. We weren't the ones killing you. We were just here. But we know that that's not a good excuse. That's not an acceptable excuse in life. We must protest when there are things that are not okay, that are not right. Therefore, this, says Rav Chaim Shmulevitz, is the answer to Iyov. Iyov also was thinking in his head, listen, Bil'am has advice to kill him, and that's what Paro's going to do. I'm going to speak up, it's not going to help. Nothing that I say is going to affect anything. So what should I do? I should speak up and have to run away like Yitro? Look what happened. Yitro was forced to run. I stay quiet. I don't want to make waves. I don't want to make noise. I'll let them do what they do, and I'll have a good life. I'm going to now cause a stir and a commotion. Why? Stay quiet. And this is the lesson to Iyov. Iyov, look at when Iyov saw what happened to Nadav and Avihu. That was the point. When what happened to Nadav, he deserved. Nadav spoke bad. But then Iyov saw that even Avihu got killed. And Iyov realized that even just listening, even tolerating evil, even just being a bystander is enough to deserve death. And if that's the case, Iyov now trembled for his own life when he realized that he too was quiet, and he didn't step up, and he didn't object, and he didn't rebuke, and he didn't say anything. And that was enough for him for Avihu to get punished. He started trembling. If that's the case, maybe on myself as well, I will get punished. And Rav Chaim Shmulevitz just takes this one step further, and he says, you know why the punishment was Yisurin, affliction? When there's affliction, says Rav Chaim Shmulevitz, something beautiful. When there's affliction, when someone is suffering, we should never know. But when somebody is in pain, what do? What's the response to pain? Person is aching. What do? Ah! Ah! Right? They're yelling. Ah! Right? Why do you yell? Is your yelling going to take away the pain? Is your yelling going to bring any fruit? Is it going to invoke are you going to now forget it if you scream? No, it's not going to bring any results. You're going to stay the same aching, same pain, same sick. But when something hurts, you scream. Says Rav Chaim Shmulevitz, Iyov, if it hurt you that the Jewish people were going to get killed, you would have screamed, regardless of the results it was going to bring. That is the mistake of Iyov. Just like a person in pain. And so what is the measure for measure? Hashem brings affliction upon him. And he was able to see for himself firsthand that when something hurts, you scream out. And if Iyov didn't scream before, it must be because Iyov was lacking in a certain way. He was lacking a certain consideration for other people. Iyov was too much to himself. It's interesting that if you look in the text, how is he described? He's described, look in the opening pasuk of the book of Job, of Iyov. It says that he was straight, Vesar Mera. Please translate somebody. Vesar Mera. He shunned evil. And that is very precise. I read to you from Rav Soloveitchik. He says, Iyov is described as a man who did no evil. And therein lies the rub. Iyov was considered by himself and others to be a great man precisely because he did no evil. But is that enough? Is it enough to just not do evil? Can moral greatness be equated with the mere avoidance of evil? Or does silence in the face of evil make one a silent partner in the atrocity? Rabbi Soloveitchik suggested that we reconsider Iyov's difficult life story in light of his neutrality. He had managed to ignore the plight of others, to stand by mutely as Jewish children were murdered and an entire nation was vilified, abused, and enslaved. The pain and suffering of Eov eventually endures seem to be poetic justice. Eov is treated to the only pain he can feel, his own. Eov and those who read of his personal suffering may be tempted to question God's justice and righteousness. But knowing now what we know about his moral stance in Egypt, is it any wonder that God questioned Eov's righteousness? Should it surprise us when Eov is given a harsh lesson in empathy? Eov's behavior in Egypt should resonate throughout our reading of the story of his life and should inform the lesson with which his story concludes. The book of Eov comes to an end when he steps outside his small own world and prays for others, finally abandoning his stance of neutrality and insularity. The lesson for our own lives is clear. Only when we learn to care for others can our lives have meaning. Only those who make it their business to feel the pain of others can know true happiness. So this is an amazing, amazing idea, my friends, from the book of Eov. Eov begins as a person who is parv, he's neutral. I care about myself and I'm not going to hurt anyone. I'm not going to hurt anyone. God forbid. I'm not a bad guy. I'm not going to hurt anybody. Live and let live. Let them do what they want. I mind my own business. You mind your own business. And Torah is teaching us that that is evil. That is wrong. Tolerating evil, to be silent in the face of evil, makes one a silent partner. Okay, we say in halacha, shtika kehoda'ah. There's something in courts that if you're silent, at least in Jewish law, that if you're shotek, if you're quiet, it's kehoda'ah. It's as if you admit. If somebody takes you to court and they have a claim, they have an accusation, and you don't object, you didn't concur either. You didn't confirm, but you didn't object. You just stayed silent. The halacha is shtika kehoda'ah. And one must be able to take the step extra in life to be able to protest, to be able to object when we see something wrong. There is another example of this in the Gemara. Let's turn please to Masechet Shabbat, page Nun Hey. The Gemara tells us that, let's go to page 55a, somewhere in the middle of the page. The Gemara says, let's go back one sentence. Amar le Rabbi Zera le Rabbi Simon. Rabbi Zera, the Gemara tells us, once he tells his friend Rabbi Simon. Okay, I'm not sure if you ever heard of him, Rabbi Simon. Rabbi Simon. Okay, there you go, that's the name Simon. You should reprimand these members of the house of the exilarch because they're misbehaving and you, Rabbi Simon, have influence over them. Amar le, he said back, Lo mekabli minai. I'm not going to reprimand them because they're not going to accept from me. They won't listen to me. Amar le, he said back, Afal gav de le mekabli. Even if they won't accept, L'chin humor, you must reprimand them. And here is the why. Take a look at this frightening Gemara. And this is, I think, something that we can all relate to. Again, just to put it in context. Suppose there's somebody in your life that you know has bad behavior, bad habit, bad addiction, not religious, something that you know that you would like to improve, that you're trying to get to them. And again, rebuke is a huge topic. We spoke about it from so many different angles. But then there's someone in our lives that we're afraid to go and approach. We don't want to create a stir. We don't want to make noise. We don't want to make waves. Take a look. Amar Rabbi Aha Rabbi Hanina, says Rabbi Aha, the son of Rabbi Hanina, Me'olam lo yatzta midat tova mi pi HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Never did a midat tova, a promise that came out of God's mouth, ever get overturned, get ever retracted, chut midavar, except for this one time. Meaning, anytime Hashem makes a promise for good, it has to be kept. By the way, the Rambam, when he goes through the laws of Navi, a prophet, and how do you know if a prophet is legitimate or not? So the Rambam says that if the prophet comes and says, and he shows you, look, I'm going to tell you the future. Tomorrow, there's going to be something like this is going to happen. So if the Navi says that, if a guy says this, and then it turns out to be false, he's lying, right? Says the Rambam, not necessarily. Depends what was the promise. If the prophecy was something bad, and then it didn't end up happening, it could be he's still legitimate. We have examples of this in our history. Yonah, remember Yonah? Yonah, we read about on Yom Kippur. He comes to the city of Nineveh. He says in 40 days you're going to be destroyed. What happened? Nothing. Does that make Yonah a liar? No. Because says the Rambam, a prophecy for bad, a nevuah for evil, can be overturned if you do teshuvah. Which is what Nineveh did. They repented and it was overturned. But if a prophecy of a Navi, if a prophet comes and says, Hashem said, he's going to bring you $1 million. And it didn't come, he's a liar. Because for good can never be rescinded. Except one time in history. Here's the Gemara, let's read it together. What is this Gemara? It's based on a pasuk in Yehezkel that Hashem said to him, go through the midst of the city and through the people of Jerusalem and put a letter tav. Yes, we know the Hebrew letter tav. Put a tav on the foreheads of the men that are there because of all the abominations that are done. And the Gemara is now going to add color to this episode. Says God to Gabriel the angel, Lech urshom al mitzhan, go and draw on the foreheads of the tzaddikim a tav of ink, so that they shouldn't get killed. This is talking about the destruction of during the destruction of when the Jews were killed in the first temple. Go and put a tav of ink, and on the wicked people put a tav of blood, a red tav, and that will be like the sign of death. It's similar to Pesach, by the way. On Pesach, what happened? So the Jews put the blood on the doors, and then, so over here, similar, but over here, it's the opposite. The blood meant you're going to get killed, okay? And if you put black ink, again, you can't see it. It wasn't a physical, visible ink that you and I can see. But God says to Gabriel, I want you to go save the righteous and destroy the wicked. Comes along the attribute of justice to Hashem and says, whoa, time out. Why are you going to let the tzaddikim live? They deserve death just as much. Ma nishanu elu me'elu. Why are they different from those? Amar la. Hashem said back, well, halal tzaddikim, these guys are righteous. Those guys are wicked. That's why I'm saving those guys. The justice said back, Amra lefanav, but time out, Ribono shel olam, master of the universe. Hayala, this is again the prosecutor. Haya bi'adam limchot v'lo michu. The righteous people, you're right, they're righteous, but they should have michu. What does that mean? They should have protested the conduct, and they never did. They never reprimanded them. They never criticized them. So you can't just be your own righteous guy in your own little corner and let everyone else go, burn in Gehenna. Not allowed to do that. You have to try to change. You have to try to help. And they didn't protest. Amar la, God said back though in defense of the righteous people. Galui veyadua lefanai. I know though, she'im michu bahem lo yikablu. God said back, yes, it's true. They never tried. But even if they would have tried to reprimand them, it would have never succeeded. They never would have accepted the rebuke to begin with, the wicked people. And that's a nice defense. So it wouldn't have helped, right? But the Gemara has one last response that the prosecutor told God, and this was a checkmate that eventually caused their death. Amra lefanav. She said back, Ribono shel olam, master of the universe. Im lefanecha galui, maybe you knew. Lahem migalui. But did they? You knew it wouldn't help, but they didn't know. And therefore, they deserve a punishment. And Hashem accepted this, and He retracted His promise of protection for the righteous people because they failed to protest against the wicked. This is such a, powerful lesson going back to what we're talking about, that sometimes in life we must protest, and we cannot say, it's not going to help. Oh, Rabbi, they're never going to listen. They've been eating not kosher since they were 5. They've been dishonest since they were kids. They were always cheaters. They were always immoral. They were always. It's not worth wasting your energy. Not worth. They're not going to listen. Maybe it's true, but you don't know that. Maybe this time will be the time that will make them decide to have a moment of inspiration, a moment of self-reflection, that they're going to decide to, you know what, turn around, make a 180, make a small change for the better. You don't know the future, and therefore we are obligated to protest. Maybe this protest will be enough. Maybe if I say something to this person, it'll help. We have to speak up. We cannot just remain silent in life. Such an amazing, again, very powerful lesson, a very scary lesson. A lot of times we're very happy and comforted that we are righteous, that we're good. And it's good that we're good. We should be good. Happy that we're good. But it's not enough if we're good. What about the people around us? Iyov didn't say anything bad. He didn't kill anyone. He's just parv. And this is something that we saw in the elections. You have to get up and vote. You can't just be you can't just stand by. If you don't vote, then you're guilty, because then, well, why am I guilty? What did I? But that's the idea. We have to step up. We have to rally. We have to do things when we see things that are not tolerable. Again, sometimes as Jews we're a bit scared because we have precedent in history of what happened when we saw so many people, and when the Jews, we just didn't want to make noise. We were just happy to just be. As long as the evil's not done to us, we're very okay with it. Just as long as I'm not the victim. That's usually when we were oppressed so often in history. But again, a little bit, we have to also make sure that we don't become like Iyov and we don't just stand by when we see something that's not okay. See something, say something. That is an unbelievable message. Again, not only from Iyov, but it's a message from Avihu. One more example, just on the same Gemara Masechet Shabbat, again, page 55. We'll go to the other side of the page, Daf Bet, Amud Bet. Gemara goes through people here that supposedly sinned on paper, but actually the Gemara wants to now come and throw a curveball and say they're not as bad as you thought. They never actually did what the text seems to say that they did. As an example, Reuven, the Torah writes that he slept with his father's concubine. Vayishkav et Bilha, Pilegesh Aviv. He slept with Bilha. Gemara says never happened. Never happened. What do you mean? But it says it happened. No, it's I mean something else, something much less. It's water. It blew it up, right? It's like when someone, when someone says, like, they exaggerate. Oh yeah, he killed someone. Hey, he killed like 50 people. This guy, right? You exaggerate. 50. He didn't kill 50. He killed 1. So he's exaggerating. He didn't actually do it, but it exaggerates. Now, why does it exaggerate? Good question. Not for now. And it goes through more people that it's David. Whoever says David did what he did, he actually didn't. He's not as bad as it makes it sound. And there's one over here. There's Reuven, Shmuel, David, Shlomo, Yoash, and Bnei Eli. Bnei Eli, who's Eli? Eli HaKohen. Anyone familiar with Eli HaKohen? Eli HaKohen, he was the Kohen Gadol at the time of which prophet? Who was his prodigy? Shemuel HaNavi. Okay? Eli, the Kohen Gadol, he had 2 sons, Chofni and Pinchas. And the Gemara wants to now say, well, first let's read about them. Shemuel, the book of Samuel 1, chapter 2, says that Eli's old, he's getting older, and he hears that his sons are not doing proper things. They're taking the meat from the Mizbeach before it was raw, and they're sleeping with the wives when the wives come. Some wives have to come bring a korban if she had a baby, different reasons. It says, Asher yishkevun et hanashim. Sounds like they were sleeping with them. And Eli says, it's not good what you're doing. And he tries to a little bit reprimand them. And Gemara says, by the way, they never did that. They never slept with them. And it brings you a proof, because it says in the book of Shemuel, it dates back to their lives, so it has to be that they're mentioned, that they're still okay. Okay, now what exactly are what's going on over here? So it says in Gemara, Pinhas lo hata. Pinhas never sinned. Okay, like it says. Okay, whatever brings pasuk. The Gemara now goes and asks a bunch of questions. It says this, it says that, it says that. How could you say this? It says that. Okay. Gemara then at the end, let's just fast forward to the end. But it calls them, at the end of the day, the pasuk calls them scoundrels. Bnei Belial. So how can you tell me that they were good? Pasuk says clearly, black and white, they were scoundrels. Answer, mitoch she'haya lo lefinhas lemahot. You know why he's a scoundrel? You know why he's Bnei Belial? Because he should have protested Hofni's conduct, and he did not. And therefore, it's like he sinned. And again, there's just one example. There's many, many examples in history. Rabbis, the Parav, Rabbi Eliezer, the Gemara says, it wasn't his cow that broke Shabbat, it was another person's cow that broke Shabbat. But because as the rabbi of the community, he didn't say anything. It's again so important to make sure that, and this is, again, going back to the Beit HaMikdash, the Gemara says, why is it destroyed? Because they lo hochichu ze et ze. Sometimes we get a little bit in life very complacent with where we are, and we take a step back from the rest of the world, but really deep down that's only revealing a lack of empathy. Now, of course, the flip side of the coin is how careful we have to be when we rebuke, to make sure we do it the right way, to make sure that we don't do it. There's a whole lesson in how to give criticism that's going to be accepted. I'm not saying no. I'm not saying we should just go and start throwing rocks at people. Chas v'shalom. That's also not acceptable, and that's not going to be received well. But we have to make sure we don't go to the other side, where we become too a lack of care, right? Kiruv, outreach, is something that all of us need to be involved in. Not only the Chabad guys that are putting tefillin on for the people on the corners, which is beautiful, but every person here has someone in their life that they can be a influence over. Everyone here can make an impact on somebody else, and we have to find that person that we are able to touch, that we are able to inspire. Just end off with one story, a beautiful story that's brought down by Yafa Eliach in her book Hasidic Tales of the Holocaust. It was coming towards the end of the war, and the Allies bombed one of the tracks, and they delayed the Nazis' plan of destroying the Jewish people. They were very upset. So that night they made all the Jews march out, and they made them in one of the craters that was created from one of the bombs. They made the Jews jump over this crater, and if you didn't land on the other side safely, it was going to be your death, and you were going to be buried right there in that crater. And the Nazis, of course, you can imagine, received a lot of amusement and entertainment that night from this activity. And one by one, all of the people are trying to jump, are trying to leap. Many were killed, unfortunately, that night. They were so weak, they couldn't make it over. And the story is told that right there as they're approaching the line, one of the Rebbes that was there, I forget the name, and the Rebbe is getting closer, and right next to him was a Jew who was already disconnected, and he turns and he says, "Rabbi, I'm not going to jump. I'm not going to jump. I'm not going to give these Nazis entertainment and the pleasure of seeing me try to and ridicule me. I'm just gonna go straight down." And the rabbi turned to him and he said, "You know, every one of us is given a beautiful gift. That gift is the gift of life. And Hashem gives it to us with one condition, and that is that we cherish it for as much as possible until we have to return it at the end back to Hashem. But that life that we're given, we cannot return not a second earlier, that we are obligated. We must try to do whatever we can to hold on to life for as long as possible. And with that, the rabbi turns back, and he's next on line, and he makes a leap of faith, and somehow or another he finds himself right there on the other side of the crater to be able to live to tell the story. Well, as he lands safely, a second later he turns, and the student of his lands right next to him. And the rabbi and the student look at each other, realizing that they made it safely, that they're going to live another day. And the student says, "Rabbi, you're an old man, you're weak. How'd you make it across? How'd you do it?" The rabbi says, "Well, right before I jumped, I was able to see my father and his father and his father all the way back to Avraham Avinu and all of these tzaddikim in front of me. And as I jumped, I pulled their coattails and I was able to pull myself across the line to continue in the Mesorah, in the link of Jewish history." And he turned to the student and he says, "But you, how'd you make it across?" And the student says, Rabbi, when I jumped, I was holding on to your coattails." We may not be this big rabbi that we're going to be able to, influence the world, but every one of us has somebody that, so to speak, is holding on to our coattails. Every one of us has somebody in our lives that looks up to us, that respects us, that values us. There is someone out there. There's got to be. Every one of us. And it's our obligation to try to lift them up and to try to pull them across the finish line, to do whatever we can. Again, going back to our idea today, to not be silent, to not just be complacent where we are in life, to be able to think about the people outside of ourselves and to care for the world around us. Iyov, when he hears what happened to Nadav and Avihu, that Avihu was also killed. So Iyov starts trembling because he realizes that he can't just receive bad news. We have to speak up. We have to be able to defend. We have to be able to protest. And Iyov, again, the book of Iyov comes to an end when he learns his lesson and he's able to step outside of his little inner world and he starts praying and thinking about other people. That is what Hashem wants from us. Okay, everybody, we'll stop over here. Have a wonderful, wonderful, amazing day. God willing, we'll see you all tomorrow. Bye-bye.